Emotions are an inevitable part of the human experience. We feel happiness, sadness, anger, and fear, sometimes in a single day, sometimes within a single hour. But have you ever stopped to question whether emotions are real in the way we perceive them? What if emotions are merely illusions, fleeting experiences shaped by our minds and past conditioning? Buddhist philosophy offers a radical perspective. Emotions, like all things in life, are impermanent. They arise and dissolve, much like waves in the ocean, yet we often cling to them as if they define us. This attachment leads to suffering, as we mistake temporary feelings for lasting truths. Imagine a person walking in a dense forest. They hear rustling in the bushes and immediately feel fear. Their mind races. Is it a wild animal? Am I in danger? The reality might be that it is just the wind or a small bird, but their conditioned response has already set off a chain reaction of anxiety and stress. This is how emotions work. They are responses shaped by past experiences, societal conditioning, and evolutionary survival instincts. They do not always reflect reality. More often than not, they are shadows, projections of our thoughts rather than reflections of the truth. The Buddha taught that suffering, dukkha, is the fundamental challenge of human existence. We suffer not because of what happens to us, but because of how we react to it. The root of this suffering is attachment, our clinging to pleasure, our resistance to pain, and our deep-seated belief that emotions define us. When we become angry, we identify with the anger. We say, "I am angry," rather than "I am experiencing anger." This subtle distinction makes all the difference. The former makes the emotion a part of our identity, while the latter acknowledges it as a passing event. Liberation from emotional suffering does not mean suppressing emotions. Instead, it means understanding them for what they truly are, temporary mental states that arise and pass away. The Buddha likened emotions to clouds passing through the sky. They come and go, but the sky itself, the true nature of our mind, remains vast and unchanging. To achieve this realization, Buddhist practice offers a set of tools. Mindfulness, study observing emotions without attachment or judgment. Meditation, dhyana, training the mind to remain present and centered. Wisdom, prajna, gaining insight into the impermanent and illusory nature of emotions. Non-attachment, virajaya, letting go of the need to control or define emotions. By cultivating these practices, we begin to see emotions for what they truly are, not forces that control us, but experiences that we can observe and let go of. Imagine a life where emotions arise, but no longer dictate your actions. You feel anger, but instead of reacting, you watch it with curiosity. You experience sadness, but rather than drowning in it, you allow it to pass like a wave returning to the ocean. This is not a life devoid of feelings. It is a life of clarity, balance, and inner peace. In this journey through Buddhist philosophy, we will explore how to transcend the illusions of emotion and step into a deeper understanding of our true nature. Through stories, psychological insights, and practical techniques, you will discover how to cultivate a mind that is free, resilient, and profoundly at peace. Are you ready to take the first step toward emotional liberation? Let us begin. 1. The illusion of emotions. Why our feelings are deceptive. Emotions are powerful, yet they are not always accurate reflections of reality. They can cloud our judgment, fuel irrational behaviors, and keep us trapped in cycles of suffering. But why are emotions so deceptive? Buddhist teachings and modern psychology offer profound insights into this question. From an evolutionary perspective, emotions serve a purpose. They help us survive. Fear warns us of danger, anger fuels self-defense, and happiness encourages behaviors that benefit us. However, in modern society, these survival-based emotions often misfire. Consider the example of social anxiety. In ancient times, rejection from a tribe could mean death, so the fear of being excluded was a necessary adaptation. Today, the same fear manifests when speaking in public or facing criticism, even though our survival is not at stake. This is an example of emotions deceiving us, triggering an intense reaction to a non-threatening situation. Scientific research supports the idea that emotions are illusions created by our minds. A famous experiment with monkeys demonstrated this. Researchers trained monkeys to associate a light turning on with receiving a reward, fruit juice. Over time, the monkeys' brains began releasing dopamine, the pleasure chemical, not when they drank the juice, but when they saw the light turn on. Eventually, they became more excited about the light itself than the actual reward. This experiment mirrors human behavior. We often anticipate happiness from achieving goals, yet when we attain them, the expected joy is short-lived. We then set another goal, believing this time will be different. This endless cycle aligns with the Buddhist teaching that attachment leads to suffering. The story of Ediba, running away from anger. Ediba, a wise elder, had an unusual way of dealing with anger. Whenever he became upset, he would run around his house 3 times. Initially, his home was small, so the act was brief. As his wealth grew, his property expanded, but his habit remained. One day, his grandson asked, "Grandfather, why do you always run when you're angry?" Ediba replied, "When I was poor, running reminded me that I had little to waste my energy on anger. Now that I have everything I need, I run to remind myself that nothing is worth holding onto with anger." His practice illustrates a profound truth: emotions do not have to control us. By shifting perspective, we can transform our emotional responses into wisdom. Recognizing emotional illusions. Understanding that emotions are not absolute truths allows us to respond rather than react. When we observe our emotions with mindfulness, we create space between feeling and action. This space is where wisdom resides. Buddhism teaches that by practicing awareness, we can see through the illusion of emotions. By doing so, we reclaim our inner peace, free from the constant turmoil of emotional ups and downs. In the next section, we will explore how Buddhist practices, particularly meditation, help dismantle these emotional illusions and guide us toward lasting peace. 2. Breaking free: Buddhist practices to overcome emotional illusions. Recognizing that emotions are illusions is the first step. The next step is actively breaking free from their control. Buddhism offers several practices designed to cultivate awareness and detachment from these deceptive feelings. Mindfulness meditation, observing without attachment. One of the most effective tools in Buddhism is mindfulness meditation, vipassana. This practice trains the mind to observe emotions without identifying with them. How to practice mindfulness meditation? Find a quiet place, sit in a comfortable position with your back straight. Focus on your breath, pay attention to the natural rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. Notice your thoughts and emotions. As emotions arise, acknowledge them without judgment. Let them pass. Instead of reacting, observe them as if they were passing clouds. Return to the present. Whenever the mind wanders, gently bring it back to your breath. By practicing regularly, individuals learn to detach from emotional turbulence and gain control over their mental state. Non-attachment, letting go of emotional clinging. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes from attachment. Whether it's attachment to pleasure or resistance to pain, both lead to suffering. The key is to recognize that emotions are transient and do not define our reality. Practical ways to cultivate non-attachment. Practice gratitude. Shift focus from what is lacking to what is present. Reframe negative experiences. Instead of viewing challenges as obstacles, see them as opportunities for growth. Limit emotional over-identification. When emotions arise, remind yourself, this is a passing experience, not my identity. By adopting these practices, we learn to break free from the grip of emotional illusions and experience greater peace and freedom. In the next section, we will explore the deeper implications of achieving emotional liberation and how it leads to a life of profound clarity and wisdom. 3. The ultimate truth, emptiness, Śūnyatā, and the nature of reality. The concept of Śūnyatā, or emptiness, is one of the most profound and challenging teachings in Buddhism. It states that nothing possesses intrinsic, independent existence. Instead, everything is interconnected and defined by relationships rather than inherent substance. Understanding emptiness, the illusion of a separate self. Many of us believe in a permanent, unchanging self, an I that exists independently. However, Buddhist philosophy challenges this notion. According to the Buddha, what we consider the self is merely a collection of constantly changing elements, our body, thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. These components, known as the 5 aggregates, skandhas, are impermanent and interdependent. Imagine a wave in the ocean. At first glance, it appears to have its own form and identity. However, it is not separate from the ocean itself. It is simply a temporary formation of water, wind, and energy. Similarly, our sense of self is a temporary construct of various factors rather than an independent entity. The story of the sawing sound, changing perception. A meditation student once complained to his teacher about a persistent noise, wood being sawed outside. He found it unbearable, believing it was disrupting his practice. His teacher advised him to meditate on the sound rather than resist it. At first, the student found it frustrating. But gradually, by simply observing the sound without labeling it as good or bad, he detached from his aversion. Eventually, he found that the sound no longer bothered him. It had become just another part of his awareness, neutral and non-intrusive. This transformation illustrates an essential Buddhist principle: suffering does not come from external events, but from our interpretation of them. By shifting our perception, we can break free from mental suffering. The nature of reality, dependent origination. A core teaching in Buddhism is pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination. This principle states that all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions. Nothing exists in isolation, everything is the result of interdependent factors. For example, a tree does not exist independently. It depends on soil, water, sunlight, and air. Even its identity as a tree is a mental label we assign. Without these conditions, it would not be a tree. Similarly, our emotions, experiences, and even identity arise from a web of interconnected causes. Recognizing this truth helps dissolve our rigid attachment to fixed identities and expectations, leading to greater flexibility and freedom. Practicing emptiness, living without attachment. Understanding emptiness does not mean believing in nothingness, rather, it means embracing the fluid, ever-changing nature of reality. Here are practical ways to cultivate this understanding. Observe without attachment, practice seeing experiences as they are, without labeling them as inherently good or bad. Question fixed identities. Challenge the idea of a permanent self by noticing how your thoughts, emotions, and desires continuously change. Practice compassion. Recognizing the interconnected nature of reality fosters empathy and reduces ego-driven conflicts. Engage in mindfulness meditation. Meditation deepens awareness of impermanence and helps cultivate a direct experience of emptiness. By realizing that all things are empty of inherent existence, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. we stop clinging to illusions and open ourselves to a more flexible, peaceful way of living. In the next section, we will explore how applying this wisdom in daily life can lead to profound transformation and lasting peace. 4. Achieving liberation, practical steps to emotional freedom. Recognizing that emotions are illusions is not enough. True liberation comes from actively transforming how we interact with them. Buddhism offers practical methods to cultivate emotional freedom and develop a sense of inner peace. These practices help us navigate emotions with wisdom rather than being ruled by them. 1. Developing emotional awareness. Awareness is the first step in breaking free from emotional illusions. This means observing emotions as they arise, without being swept away by them. Mindful observation: when an emotion arises, pause and acknowledge it. Say to yourself, "This is anger" or "This is anxiety." Recognize triggers. Identify what situations, people, or thoughts tend to provoke strong emotions. Distinguish between emotion and self. Understand that emotions are experiences, not defining characteristics of who you are. 2. Practicing non-attachment. Buddhism teaches that suffering stems from attachment. By learning to let go, we reduce the emotional grip that suffering has over us. Detach from emotional narratives. When emotions arise, refrain from feeding them with inner dialogue. Instead of thinking, "I am always angry at this person," simply observe, anger is present. Embrace impermanence. Remind yourself that all emotions pass, just like clouds in the sky. Cultivate acceptance. Accept experiences as they are without resistance. The less you fight emotions, the more they lose their power. 3. Transforming emotional energy into wisdom. Instead of suppressing or acting on emotions impulsively, transform them into deeper understanding and insight. Channel anger into clarity. Anger often signals a deeper need or boundary. Use it as an opportunity to understand what matters to you. Use fear to foster courage. Rather than avoiding fear, explore it with curiosity. What is it protecting you from? What can you learn from it? Turn sadness into compassion. Recognize that sadness often connects you to the shared human experience of suffering. Let it cultivate empathy rather than despair. 4. Integrating mindfulness into daily life. Mindfulness is not limited to meditation, it can be practiced in every moment. Mindful breathing. Use the breath as an anchor whenever emotions feel overwhelming. Grounding techniques. Focus on physical sensations, such as your feet touching the ground, to stay present. Conscious responses. Before reacting to emotions, take a breath and choose a response that aligns with your values rather than acting out of impulse. 5. Living with compassion and loving kindness. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of metta, loving kindness, in achieving emotional freedom. Practice self-compassion. Treat yourself with kindness, especially when facing difficult emotions. Extend compassion to others. Recognize that everyone experiences suffering and emotions. Respond with understanding rather than judgment. Engage in loving kindness meditation. Regularly cultivate thoughts of goodwill toward yourself and others. Emotional liberation does not mean the absence of emotions, but rather the ability to navigate them with wisdom and clarity. By practicing awareness, non-attachment, mindfulness, and compassion, we free ourselves from emotional suffering and experience true peace. The journey is ongoing, but each moment of mindfulness brings us closer to a life of balance and enlightenment. In the next section, we will explore how to apply these insights to daily interactions and relationships, deepening our sense of harmony with the world around us. The final lesson: inner peace through awareness. The path to emotional liberation ultimately leads to one fundamental realization: true peace comes from awareness. Awareness is the foundation of wisdom, the key to breaking free from suffering, and the bridge to genuine inner peace. 1. Seeing through the illusion of control. Much of our suffering arises from the illusion that we can control everything, our emotions, our circumstances, and even other people. But the truth is, the only thing we can control is our awareness and how we respond. Accept impermanence. Recognizing that everything is transient allows us to let go of unnecessary attachment. Let go of resistance. Suffering increases when we resist what is. Accepting reality as it is, rather than how we wish it to be, brings deep peace. Trust the flow of life. Just as the river flows without resistance, embracing life's changes without clinging reduces emotional turmoil. 2. The practice of equanimity. Equanimity is the ability to remain calm and balanced, regardless of external circumstances. It is not about indifference, but rather about seeing all experiences, pleasant or unpleasant, with the same steady mind. Observe without reacting. Instead of immediately reacting to emotions, practice simply watching them arise and dissolve. Balance between pleasure and pain. Do not chase pleasure or avoid discomfort, both are fleeting. Cultivate an open heart. Approach every experience with curiosity rather than judgment. 3. Finding joy in simplicity. Peace is not found in grand achievements but in the simple moments of life. When we cultivate gratitude and presence, even mundane activities become deeply fulfilling. Practice mindful gratitude. Notice and appreciate the beauty in small things. Detach from the need for more. True contentment comes from wanting less, not acquiring more. Live in the present. The mind often dwells on the past or worries about the future, but joy is always found in the present moment. 4. The power of compassion. Compassion for oneself and others is the final key to lasting peace. When we understand that everyone is navigating their own struggles, it becomes easier to let go of resentment and embrace kindness. Forgive yourself and others. Holding on to past grievances only burdens the heart. See beyond the ego. Recognize that suffering is universal, and compassion bridges the divide between self and others. Extend loving kindness. A simple act of kindness can create profound ripples of peace in the world. Inner peace is not something we attain once and keep forever. It is a practice, a continuous return to awareness, a commitment to presence. By embracing impermanence, practicing equanimity, finding joy in simplicity, and cultivating compassion, we step into a life of freedom and tranquility. The journey does not end here. Every moment is an opportunity to deepen our awareness, to choose peace over turmoil, and to cultivate a heart that is open, compassionate, and free. This is the essence of Buddhist wisdom, the path to a truly awakened life.